Today, we're going to break down the 7 pillars of retirement planning.
To make the most of your retirement, you really need to figure out how you're going to stay active and look after yourself.
This one sounds like it's all about the fun stuff. What does designing a fulfilling lifestyle in retirement look like?
Cash flow really is the heartbeat of retirement. Probably the number one mistake that I see, Lindsay, is people underestimating their retirement expenses.
So when people hear legacy, they often think of financial inheritance, but you look at it differently, right?
Two of the most important factors at measuring longevity are... Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Retirement Planning Simplified. I'm Joe Curry, along with my co-host, Lindsay Wilson, who I would typically say as always, but we've kind of switched things up a bit, trying to get you guys the info right away, which we're going to do again today. So we're going to jump right in, but just wanted to remind everybody why Lindsay hasn't been on for a couple episodes. So anyway, maybe stick around for the end. We'll do a bit of an update.
Yeah. So today we're going to discuss the 7 pillars of retirement planning, a sort of practical guide. How to plan for retirement in a way that goes beyond just finances. So, Joe, you've been for a long time at helping people plan for retirement. And we generally, as a group of people, talk about a holistic approach to retirement. So today we're going to break down the 7 pillars of retirement planning. So could you give us just a quick overview of those pillars?
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. So at the end of the day, I think our listeners are probably getting, from all the guests we've had on lately, this larger breadth of information around retirement planning, which isn't all based on the finances. So I thought today we would just talk more about kind of what are all these different pieces or these different pillars. So here's kind of the 7 key ones that I see around retirement planning. So number 1 is financial planning. Number 2 is our health. Number 3 is our housing. Number 4, our lifestyle. Number 5, where we're getting our social connections. Number 6, legacy or family values. And number 7, mental and emotional well-being. So these are the pillars that kind of all work together to make sure that you're not just surviving in retirement, but hopefully you're thriving.
Right. So I think we should dive in with financial planning, the cornerstone of retirement. Why do you call this the cornerstone of retirement?
Well, at the end of the day, it's the foundation that supports everything else, right? So we talk about that, it's not all about money. Retirement isn't about money, but it does give you that foundation to be able to have the freedom to do all the other things that we talked about. The other pillars kind of meet all those different needs. So if you don't have that strong financial plan, it's really hard to feel secure and make confident decisions about your lifestyle, your health, your housing. So I'll just kind of do a high level through, what do we expect or what should we be looking at for our financial planning? Because there's really like another 7 pillars within financial planning, Lindsay. So just from a really high level, really, we want to always start with, what are our values, which should lead into, defining more specific goals so that we can start to build a plan around achieving those goals. When we think about the first step from the financial side of it, it's, cash flow really is the heartbeat of retirement. So understanding what our cash flow needs are going to be in retirement. And what probably the number one mistake that I see, Lindsay, is people underestimating their retirement expenses. When we ask them to look at expenses, they're looking at just what are those kind of minimal monthly expenses we have every month, like my property taxes, my heat and hydro, my groceries. But people don't think like, where's the rest of your paycheck going? Like you're spending more than just that money. And when we look at the amount coming in your bank account and the amount going out, it's always a lot more than what people think when they do the first run at expenses. So beyond cash flow, we need to get into retirement income planning. So understanding your retirement income style, understanding the different sources of retirement income you're going to have, from pensions to Canada Pension Plan or OAS to your personal savings, and really figuring out how we're going to fill the gap between those cash flow needs and those guaranteed income sources in retirement. And in filling that gap, we need to have a withdrawal strategy to make sure the amount we're taking out is sustainable. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's not so much what we have as far as the total dollars coming in, but it's how much we get to keep, right? So tax strategy is very important. How are we withdrawing money in the most tax efficient way? When do you take CPP and OAS? Should you be melting down your RSP, so getting money out of your RSPs earlier on in retirement, or do you want that tax deferred growth? Because depending on your situation, it's going to be different for different people. Where do TFSAs fit into all of this? And, depending on where your income's going to be, like, do we need to look at making sure you're not giving back your old age security through the clawback? Of course, there's investment strategy. If you just sit on cash, then you're going to be spending a lot less money in retirement, right? So you need to have a plan that's going to help your portfolio continue to grow and stay ahead of inflation so you can maintain your lifestyle and meet those goals through retirement. And really, this, again, I mentioned retirement income style earlier there, Lindsay, but it really comes back to that's a really good place to start, right? So we have that RESA. Again, we can get that to anybody if they want to find out their retirement income style. So if you want that, just email Lindsay, info@retirementplanningsimplified.ca, and say you want the RESA so you can figure that retirement income style out for you. That's going to go a long way to helping you with those withdrawal strategies and retirement income planning. Of course, there's risk management. There's a lot of risks in retirement, Lindsay. So we want to make sure as part of your plan, you're identifying what are the risks, the potential things that could upset your retirement plans. And then what are we able to do to try to mitigate or at least minimize those risks? And then there's estate planning. So getting your estate documents in place. It doesn't end there, though. It's also organizing your affairs, communicating with family and your executors about what's happening, what do you want to see happen so that it's not a big mess at the end of the day when something does happen to you. So obviously there's a lot there in this financial piece, and we could go all day on that, which, we have a whole podcast on it, Lindsay. But I mean, that really is where having a certified financial planner to help you kind of get some clarity around that situation and lay out that plan does make a huge difference. Now, I know some of you listening are do-it-yourselfers and you love this. That's great if you do, but I know a lot of you are just trying to figure out what do you need to do to make sure you can retire. And that's where a planner can really come in and help.
And we'll talk about pillar 2. I think this is one that you and I both really enjoy talking about. It's health, and it's staying active and vital in retirement. But you're looking at this a bit differently than just healthcare costs, right, Joe?
Yeah, that's right. I think when people hear us talk about health, in retirement, like the first thought is, oh yeah, we got a plan for some long-term care or other needs at the end. And that is part of your financial plan. But we want to make sure that you're staying healthy and active so that you can enjoy retirement, right? So the fact that you've got to this point where you're in retirement, you're getting close to retirement and kind of pulling the trigger there, you've done a lot of saving probably. There's been a lot of hard work and sacrifice to get here. This is a new beginning. So we don't want it to be a place where you just, sit around and just relax and not do anything, because then you're going to lose your health and you are going to slow down and you're not going to be able to make the most of it. So one of my favorite resources around, I'd say longevity, but this idea of health span as opposed to lifespan. So when I say, we tell people the chances of a 65-year-old couple, the chances of one of them living to age 100 is pretty good. And then people usually look at me, Lindsay, and say, well, I don't want to live that long. That sounds horrible. So, but it's not just lifespan. Like if you stay active and you look after your health, take care of yourself, you could have a long health span, not just lifespan. And health span means, yeah, you're living longer, but you're also being able to enjoy life during that time. So it doesn't mean, living to 85, going to a retirement home for 15 years. That's not what we're talking about here. But to do that, you have to stay active. I mean, 2 of the most important factors at measuring your longevity, or the biggest contributors, are your VO2 max. So how well your body can utilize oxygen intake, right? So in other words, like your cardio.
And how strong. Decline as you get older as well.
Yeah. And so strength is the other one. And so both of those decline. So by staying active, making exercise a regular part of your routine allows you to keep that strength up, that VO2 max higher, which again is going to give you more health span, right? So this doesn't mean you have to be a fitness fanatic, but you do want to think about, as you get to retirement, what's your routine going to look like? You need a routine anyway. We've talked about why that's so important, Lindsay, in other episodes, but just building in things that are going to keep you active. And it doesn't have to be going and, grinding it out in the gym, but, find things that you enjoy that are going to make it easier for you to stay active. And again, that the routine is going to help you get out of bed every day. So start small, find something that you like. And if that is the gym, that's great. But yeah, you really need to make the most of your retirement. You really need to figure out how you're going to stay active and look after yourself.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at pillar 3. It's housing, creating a comfortable and sustainable living environment. How does where you live fit into this holistic plan?
Sure. So housing is a big one because, again, this is going to fit into your financial plan as well. But there's a lot of considerations here when you get to retirement. Now, a lot of our clients that find us in Peterborough, they might not be making a big shift. We kind of are in a retirement community. But for a lot of people, they're working somewhere and they've been there because of their job, right? Now they have the freedom to think about, where do I actually want to live? And this really ties a lot into the lifestyle pillar. But thinking about, again, being intentional about where you're living, not just staying where you are because you've always been there. Though you might want to, there might be a lot of reasons to stay where you are. I know a lot of people do want to do that. But also, how have your family dynamics changed? Do you have a big house that you don't need anymore? Is that going to take time away from you being able to travel or do other hobbies, things that you want to do because you're, having to maintain a big house? Or, maybe there's the opportunity to top up your retirement funds by downsizing. You also want to consider, and this, again, a lot of these tie together, right? Thinking about the social side of thing, but, what's your community look like around where you're living, right? We want to take that into consideration because you don't want to be somewhere where you're going to be isolated now that you're not going to work all the time, right? So that's going to be important as well for your mental well-being. And then there's also these conversations that as you're entering into retirement, so if you're not there yet, these might not be top of mind, but as you're into retirement, you want to be having conversations about your long-term plans with your family early on, right? So we've seen, Lindsay, a lot of clients who make that transition to long-term care or different scenarios where it wasn't really planned. It just kind of happened because, there wasn't a lot of forethought into it. So you want to have these conversations with family about, what are the different possibilities and what are your preferences? So just having those conversations doesn't mean that something's going to happen right away, right? It's planning, it's being prepared. So there's a lot of different things to think about when it comes to your housing. But really, it's about being intentional and making the most of your quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's look at pillar 4, which is lifestyle, designing a fulfilling retirement. So this one sounds like it's all about the fun stuff. What does designing a fulfilling lifestyle in retirement look like?
Well, it is the fun stuff. So retirement is a chance to focus on the things that you love. Maybe that's travel, hobbies, giving back, volunteering. Maybe it's learning. Maybe, lifetime growth is important to you and it's figuring out what are some new skills you could be learning. But again, you've worked hard, you've saved, you've sacrificed to get here. So you don't want to just kind of go through the motions in retirement. You want to be intentional about designing your life, designing that lifestyle, right? So thinking about how you're going to spend your time. So travel is the one we hear all the time, Lindsay, but that's not for everybody, right? So for other, it's just investing time in hobbies that have always been there. You just never really had time to commit. It gives you, it's a time to reflect as well and think about, we talked about values earlier. What are my values? What is most important to me? And starting to design your life around living out those values. I think that when we're all working, it's really easy to fall into that trap of just kind of day to day to day. And, I think we've all heard the saying that, the days are long, the years are quick, right? So we don't want our retirement to feel like that, even though I'm sure it will, time does still fly by, but we want to make sure we're making the most of that time, right? So if you're still working right now, it's always better to plan to retire to something. So don't just make retirement about getting away from your job. And part of that planning is, knowing what you want your lifestyle to look like when you get into retirement, because then you can also, that's going to come back to your financial planning, right? So once you have those goals and you're thinking about what you want life to look like, you can start building that into your financial plan.
Mm-hmm. And pillar 5 is social connection, and it's building a strong support network. So I think it seems like to me, social connections seem to be more important than ever. How do you approach this pillar?
Yeah, this is so big. So again, it kind of falls into the community, the lifestyle, these other pieces, but it's its own pillar in the sense that I think we need to be really intentional about this. So, studies show us that social isolation can have a significant negative impact on our mental and physical health in retirement. It could lead to cognitive decline, dementia, a lot of other things that are not so fun, depression. So we really want to be intentional about how we're maintaining relationships. And we've done full episodes on this, but when you're working, it just seems like you're always going to be around those people. And then one day you retire, well, those people are still working, they're still going to work, and your life takes a bit of a different direction. And so you might have some lunch catch-ups and things like that, but you really need to find your new community. Like, where are you going to spend your time on a regular basis? Again, some routines. So whether it's new hobbies where you're out with other people, whether it's community groups, getting involved with things like, Rotary, for example, or other volunteer. Yeah, there's so many different ways to get involved, right? And there's other adult types of groups where they're prioritizing trying different things, right? Different activities, things like that. So there's lots of options, but again, you got to look for them. And it is really important. And you don't want to just assume this is going to happen naturally. You want to create a plan for how you're going to stay connected.
Absolutely. And now pillar 6 is legacy and family values, leaving more than just money. So when people hear legacy, they often think of financial inheritance, but you look at it differently, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that inheritance piece is really part of our more traditional estate planning, right? So what we're talking about here is, our values, our traditions, our connections. So, it's about spending quality time with family, sharing your stories, passing down lessons you've learned to, future generations. So again, this is probably doesn't happen in a lot of cases if we're not intentional about it. So, have family meetings. And maybe it could be part of your normal traditions, like maybe getting together for Christmas, for example. But you can carve out some intentional time where you're having a more kind of like a meeting style where you're being intentional about sharing these stories and these values. So family meetings are also a great time to talk about your financial plan and your estate plan, a more traditional sense of estate planning, right? Because that is something important that you should be doing. It's a time to talk with family about, what you want to leave behind, what that legacy is going to look like for you, what you want it to look like, right? And when your loved ones, when you can share these stories, it does make them and you feel more connected to each other, which is always great. And I know that, I don't know about you, Lindsay, but I like learning from other people's mistakes a lot whenever I can. So I'm open to hearing about how other people in my family have maybe learned the hard lessons. And then if you're philanthropic at all, this is also a really good way to have those kind of family values conversations. And this doesn't mean like you have to be, have your own foundation and have family meetings for how's the foundation going to be using our money this year. But if you're giving any money at all, even if you're giving, $1,000 a year, there's no reason you can't be, maybe meet with your grandkids or your kids and be like, what are like some important family causes or experiences we've had or things we want to support, and have some family input on where you're going to do that giving, right? So it could be on a larger scale. You could do something like a donor advised fund, and you can put money in there and it kind of works like a foundation where you're giving in perpetuity, and you can have bigger family meetings, but it could also be small. It could just be, at the start of the year, you figure out a budget for the next year. And then again, it's just rather than the first person that knocks on your door, you're actually, having some family discussions around where you're going to give back. So there's always the, the more difficult conversations around final wishes. Again, the more traditional estate planning topic, your trustees or executors, powers of attorney, like those are part of this, but really taking it beyond that.
Yeah. And now pillar 7, mental and emotional well-being, cultivating a positive outlook. Mental and emotional well-being, why is this so important?
Yeah. So, I mean, retirement, it's a big life change, right? And it's really easy to feel lost without that routine that work gives us. So your mental outlook is going to play a big part in how fulfilling your retirement is. So, I mean, there's some maybe less traditional things you can do to kind of help manage stress, whether it's practicing mindfulness like yoga or meditation. But, maybe it's other things like just creating good routines. This comes back to staying mentally active through hobbies or learning new skills. Can go back to your physical health, right? Like having a routine around exercise is always good for mental health as well. And then I think a big thing is that it's normal to feel lost. I mean, and lots of people, don't get me wrong, lots of people thrive in retirement and they were born for retirement, but it is also very normal for people to feel a bit lost, feel a bit depressed. There's different things that go into that, but it's also okay to help, right? If you need support, it's okay to, talk to people and get some support around that. So that all might seem like a little bit deep, but again, make sure you're engaged socially, you're staying active, get commitments in place that force you into a routine, to force you out of the house. All of these are going to be, a good way to get yourself out of bed in the morning and help with that mental wellness.
Right. So let's bring it all together. The 7 pillars of retirement planning, each one plays a key role in building a retirement that's secure, balanced, and meaningful.
Yeah. So when you think about all these pillars, you can start to realize that retirement isn't just about the numbers, right? I mean, we do need to start there to an extent to have the freedom to be able to do and look after all these other pillars, but it is a lot more than just the numbers. And so it's about living well, being prepared for every aspect of life as we move forward. So I think that kind of brings it together is to not think small, not just think about your investments, but think about the bigger picture, Lindsay.
Yeah. Any final action for people listening?
Yeah. So you know what? If you have done a financial plan, maybe take a step back and think, have you started looking at these different key pillars of a retirement plan, or have you just looked at the numbers? And if you've only looked at the numbers, it's time to reflect. So just start by reflecting on maybe just that lifestyle design piece first. Like, what do you want life to look like? And just start there.
Right. Well, thank you, Joe, for taking us through the 7 pillars.
My pleasure. So maybe before we sign off, a couple things. If today's episode got you thinking about your own retirement plan, make sure you subscribe and check out our other videos and podcasts. And like, subscribe, and share, all that good stuff, because the more people that hear this, the more people we can help. But also, Lindsay and I have not been on here together in a while. So maybe, Lindsay, we could just do a quick update. Is there anything new and exciting happening in your world?
Oh, well, a new exciting thing for me. We taught a class at Trent. Well, I was a teaching assistant to Joe at Trent last weekend. We led a retirement readiness workshop, which was well attended and I think went really well. So that's something that we're going to be offering again next year. And then we're launching the client review season. It's here. Spring review is upon us.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Although when people are listening to this, we might even be almost done. But
yeah, true. Yeah.
And so on that note, by the time this is coming out, we'll probably be about maybe 6 weeks away from the launch of an additional podcast. So maybe stay tuned to see what's going on there.
Yeah. Big announcement coming.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay. Thank you.